Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and it's full review time. This is the Kubey Barracuda. It's a knife that was designed by Parsons Bladeworks, and I will link down below to Parsons Bladeworks. And then also, I actually haven't pulled this link up myself, but I've been told that on Knife Global, which is, I've never bought knives from there before, but I've been told that these are available for much less than they are on the Kubey site on Knife Global. Sorry, I just got like an eyelash in my eye. Make a wish. Anyway, so I will link down below to where they are available for the lowest price as of what I've heard. But this is the first I've experienced a Kubey knife. I don't believe before this I've ever even handled a Kubey. If I had, it was in passing. Unless I'm totally forgetting and I've reviewed one at some point. I don't think that's the case though. But yeah, so this has been a fun one in terms of the way that it came into my possession as well. My buddy Brian, many of you may know him as Transparent Knives on Instagram. He does really cool reblades on bug outs and 940s and stuff. He's friends with the designer of this knife, Parsons Bladeworks. So he had this one. He actually Rockwell tested this one himself too, which was cool. I want to say he told me it Rockwelled at like 60 or 61. It's S30V blade steel, so it's pretty cool. Anyway, he's friends with Parsons Bladeworks, and he asked me if I'd want to check it out, show it on the channel, and I said sure. So I met up with him in person. We grabbed lunch, got to chat and talk, and he handed it off to me. And I've had it now for, I think, like 2 weeks. I got to get it back to him. So I've carried it a good handful of times. I've used it a decent bit. He gave me his blessing to go ahead and cut with it and carry it, which is really nice. I very rarely will take a loaner if I can't do that. It would have to be pretty special circumstances, like a prototype or something. But it's been an interesting one to get to know a little bit. So I will link down below to Parsons Bladeworks, to the link to Knife Global if it's still live when I put this up, where you can buy these for less than they are on the Kubey site. And then I'll link Transparent Knives as well on Instagram, because he's a cool dude and he's the one who made this happen. So yeah, on Knife Global, they've been going for about $170. It's an S30V titanium liner lock. Titanium scales on both sides though. All titanium hardware, clip, backspacer, all of that. And it's a front flipper. And it's really, really nice in terms of construction. I wasn't sure what to expect out of a Kubey. I know that they obviously use like pretty decent materials and stuff. I'd seen a lot of pictures, but having one in hand is always different than just seeing one in photos. And I like the pivot. I think they used pretty cool hardware. You got like a teardrop shape thing going on there. I like the machining all over. It's done well. It's not too much, but it's got like, it's not just plain either. You've got these kind of holes and divots drilled in interesting spots. The anodizing on the hardware is really nice. You'll see, again, we've got the same pivot over here. We've got a nice blue anodized clip and backspacer. I like that it's a liner lock a lot. We'll talk about that some more in action, but basically front flippers that are slim, that are also frame locks, are a dangerous game to play, because lock bar pressure can be a doozy when you like have to grab the knife like this in order to front flip it. Oftentimes if it's a frame lock, you're really putting a lot of pressure on the lock bar, and that can kind of ruin the action. So liner lock was a smart choice here. I'm assuming that it's a steel liner. It's an insert set into the titanium in there. It's fastened in back here. I can see where it's kind of set there into the frame. You've got a lot of internal milling, show side, lock side, even so obviously the spot where the lock bar sits, it's nested in, but even more than that, there's another channel that's milled out. So nice, fairly lightweight knife, mostly because it's slim and titanium and there's internal milling, but it's not like a featherweight either. It's not trying to be a bug out killer, but it's nice and light in its package. All right, so let's kind of go through carry, cutting, action, ergos, all that stuff that I usually talk about, and we'll just go from there. So we'll start with ergos, because I like to start with ergos. It's one of the most important things. Pretty make or break for me on a knife. It's got bad ergos, I'm not going to be into it. Ergos on this are quite good. For a slender knife especially, I like it. It's probably pretty similar in terms of like handle dimensions to a Benchmade 940. It's a slim little guy, but it's thick enough. Not overly thick, it doesn't feel like a chunky boy, but it's thick enough, and the pocket clip actually kind of adds to it in a nice way for it being so narrow. It's just a nice neutrally shaped pocket clip that's not pointy anywhere, kind of follows the curve of the knife. I find that that's kind of resting in my palm in a nice way. It feels a little bit more hand filling because of that. You've got jimping up here, which is pretty good jimping, I'll say. It's nice and tightly spaced. It's not too aggressive. I could take it or leave it, and usually I'm more of a leave it kind of guy. I usually don't appreciate jimping. Being a front flipper, it's going to need it on the front of the knife anyways, because you have to have it there to get grip on that. So they've just continued that same jimping pattern further down the spine so that your thumb lands on it. And it does lock in pretty well, and it's not overly aggressive. The shape of the handle feels nice. The shape of the blade in relation to the shape of the handle, I feel like it feels pretty intuitive. The fact that the tip kind of comes down like a warnie feels nice. I'd say ergos, especially in a saber grip, are just really good here. Not the greatest I've ever felt, but there's no hot spots, nothing's poking or prodding me, and it feels nice in hand for how slender the handle is. Hammer grip, also quite comfortable. I feel the clip a little bit more when I do that compared to saber grip, but it's not offensive, it's not bothering me. Again, not hot spotty. Draw cut is surprisingly really comfortable. Feels quite good the way that it sets in my palm. I like that. Reverse grip, pretty good. Reverse grip is nice on here. Nice full four-finger grip. Any orientation I put it in, it feels nice like that. Reverse grip draw cut, not the best, but it's totally doable. If you needed to make a cut or two that way, you could. But yeah, so ergos are for a handle that's so slender and has a little bit of a crook to it, surprisingly really good. Let's do action next because it's a front flipper. It's nice. I think on a front flipper, at least with my preferences, you need a pretty snappy detent. If you got a light detent on a front flipper, it can be one that's kind of easy to fail. But at the same time, you don't want it so stiff that people are slipping off of it either, because it can be a little bit awkward for some. And I feel like they've really dialed this well. It is a great detent for a front flipper, in my opinion. It's just snaps right out, feels very good. The height of how much they put up here makes it pretty easy. You're well above the pivot. If the front flipper sits like down here, right? If you're landing at this level, it's going to be really hard to front flip because getting torque to come over the pivot is going to be difficult. So in terms of like the angle that they achieved here by just making that jut up a little bit, that was the right move because it gives you the leverage you need. So I like that. On deployment, it's very snappy. It feels good, locks up all the way every time. And for me, granted I've used quite a few front flippers at this point, it feels like a pretty intuitive one to grasp. On closure, it's smooth. It's not like a guillotine drop shutty knife, but it's a thin little blade and it drops fairly well. I mean, you got to give it a few shakes, but it's nice. It's pleasant to play with. I feel like front flippers, in my opinion, if you're picking a front flipper, you're picking that because it's fun to play with. I don't see any advantage in terms of like hand placement to get into it quickly, or like it's not like the tactical choice. It's not the utilitarian choice. I feel like a regular flipper or thumb studs or a hole or whatever would be more like, if it's just for like a user knife, it would be more the choice. But front flippers are meant to be fun. At least that's the way I look at them. So it needs to be good, and this one's good. Yes, we've talked opening and closing on action. I don't think there's much more to say about that. Let's talk carry for a moment. This knife carries well. It's really thin this way, which is a very good, in terms of like comfort in pocket, that's a important metric, is how thin it is. Both this way and this way, I'd say for me, is even the most important for how comfortable a knife is going to be. And it's not overly thick. I think, like I already mentioned in ergos, it feels a little bit thicker than maybe they had to make it, but it feels right in ergos because of that. And so I think, yeah, I don't know, it's plenty thin. It's not an overly thick handle. It's so thin this way that it kind of disappears pretty well. It's fairly light. The pocket clip works really well for me. It's not going to be a deep carry, which is my preference, but for a non-deep carry clip, there's not a lot of knife sticking out of your pocket. It looks pretty classy, and it's a skinny clip. I like that it's not like bam, giant knife clip in my pocket that everyone's staring at. It's nice and kind of understated, and it's anodized blue, so I guess if you're wearing it in jeans, then it'll blend in even more. I don't know, the pocket clip works well. It's slender, it's fairly light, so it carries well. I've had a good experience with it. That leaves us with cutting performance. This blade, again, S30V, I don't mind that blade steel choice at all. S30V has done me well on a lot of knives for a long time, and with it having Rockwell tested pretty well, that makes me even happier about it, because any steel that's not heat treated properly is not going to do well. But it's a nice tall flat grind. I really like the blade shape for its utility. This knife is just awesome for opening boxes and packaging and stuff. It's really easy even to grab kind of in a grip like this and just kind of draw through stuff. And yeah, that tip is precise. I don't know if you'll be able to see. It's not so thin that I'm like, oh man, this is a dainty little tip you really got to worry about. But it does come down to a nice, thin, precise point. And the blade shape isn't quite just flat. You've got a little bit of curve kind of all the way through, unless my eyes are totally deceiving me. But it's pretty close to just a flat surface here. And it's just worked really well for me. I like it. I like even kind of choking all the way up to here, pushing through stuff. It's sliced fairly well. It's pretty thin behind the edge. Not a super thick blade stock to begin with, which was the right call on this knife in my opinion. I don't think a thick blade stock would help this knife in any way, so the fact that they went fairly thin, nice tall flat grind, good edge that came on it, it's nice. It is a good, usable knife. So at the end of the day, I guess the question that I should probably answer is like, am I going to buy one of these for myself? And the answer is no. I don't mean for that to sound harsh, because I'd recommend this knife pretty easily to people who are interested in it. If you look at this knife, you think it looks cool, and the question is it a good knife? My answer is yes. I have found that this is a good knife, and it's recommendable. But it just kind of sits in a segment of the market that, to me, doesn't feel like it's super my speed at the moment. Not to like sound pretentious or whatever, but I've been chasing higher end things lately, and things that are just more like, I don't know, it has to really jump out at me. I've slowed down quite a bit too on how many knives I'm buying, like the rate at which I'm acquiring new knives. And so just in this moment, having already experienced it, that's also something that counts against it, frankly. It's rare for me to take a loaner of a knife and then end up buying it, because I've already experienced it. And once I've reviewed it, then I have less of an excuse to carry it compared to other new knives that I'm getting in. So to buy one would feel a little redundant when I've already tried it out, had it for a couple of weeks in my pocket on my desk, cut with it. I wouldn't be experiencing something new by buying it, which is part of a motivating factor for me in buying a new knife. But yeah, it's recommendable for me. I certainly think it's good. I think it's a nice offering. I think it's cool to see a new designer with his first kind of licensed design on the market. This gives me way more interest in Kubey moving forward. This knife is really well built. All the components seem very nice. The fit and finish is great. The action is dialed. It's a good knife. And so, yeah, it gives me more faith in them as a brand, which is a good thing as well. And yeah, I guess that's kind of where I land on it. I think that's about as concise as I can put it. But it's nice. I like it, and I'm glad I've gotten to experience it. So, again, I want to thank Parsons Bladeworks for designing it, Kubey for making it, I guess. I don't know why I'm like thanking Kubey didn't do anything. But Brian for loaning it to me. He deserves a big thank you. And yeah, so check him out. Parsons Bladeworks, Brian from Transparent Knives. And again, I'll link that place where I've been told it's the cheapest place to buy it right now, in case any of you are interested in doing that. I don't have an affiliate link with them or anything. There's nothing I get out of that whatsoever. It's just what I've heard. And for informational purposes, I'll put that down there in case you're looking for one. So there you have it. This is the Kubey Barracuda, and I'm glad I've gotten to check it out. It's a fun front flipper for sure. I think it's also worth saying, I just totally lisped that also, it's also worth saying, I rarely keep front flippers, and that's something I've learned about myself. It's kind of like how OTFs started out for me. I would find that they were really fun for a minute, and then I'd kind of get over it. This one I should say too, you can middle finger flick it just by pressing on the blade, and that helps, but it's not like middle finger flicking with a hole, so it doesn't like really solve that for me. Front flippers I just find get old. Like even like the 520 and 523 and stuff, like really nice CKF front flipper, those got kind of old for me when I've checked them out. Or I don't know, the Kaiser Feist I've owned a couple of, they always got old. Like they don't keep my attention very well for very long. And so I think if this had a hole too, I can middle finger flick it or front flip it, be way more interested. Maybe that's some feedback that's worth giving to the designer and to Kubey and whatever. But anyway, there it is. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you on the next one.